Shields up, Ironbreakers. Welcome back to Dragon's Dogma 2, and as I promised in my previous video, today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the Mystic Spearhand Vocation. Now initially when I saw the promotional materials and gameplay for the Mystic Spearhand Vocation, it didn't really strike me as something that I was going to be super interested in. It reminds me a little bit of the Insect Glaive in Monster Hunter, and that is a weapon that even though I play it, I don't really tend to spend too much time messing around with it and learning all of its nuances. Usually I spend most of my time with things like the Gun Lance, Charge Blade, Sword and Shield. Those are my go-to weapons when it comes to Monster Hunter. So looking at the vocations that were available in Dragon's Dogma 2, I was looking much more towards the warrior, fighter, maybe even the thief, because the thief has blasting powders, and naturally being a gun lance main, I like explosions quite a bit. I was even considering maybe doing a warfarer and then using those three vocations, the fighter, the warrior, the thief, and that would eventually become kind of like my own hybrid main vocation, so to speak. However, having now played the game, and I've gotten to experience 4 different vocations, which were the Magic Archer, Mystic Spearhand, Fighter, and Trickster, I have to say, the Mystic Spearhand was so far above and beyond for my personal tastes than any of the other vocations that it is currently probably going to be my main vocation when I actually start playing the game. It was that good. It really surprised me. And this is a hybrid vocation. For those of you that are not aware, you can see it because of the class, I say class, the vocation logo, which is blue on one side, red on the other. So the blue signifies mage and sorcerer, whereas red signifies things like fighter and warrior. So it is a hybrid class, and for all intents and purposes, this is the replacement for the Mystic Knight. If you guys are not aware, it has been confirmed by the Aki Itsuno in some interview, I believe a Eurogamer interview, that the 10 vocations that are currently listed are the only vocations that are going to be available. So Mystic Knight is not going to be making a comeback, which was also one of my favorite vocations of the original Dragon's Dogma. Naturally, Mystic Knight had the big shield, big mace. I love that stuff, right? But essentially what the Mystic Spearhand feels like is a Jedi Knight, which was very surprising for me because I expected to have that glaive aspect to it, but the way that his magical side works was really right up my alley. Like, I just really enjoyed casting the different spells that we had, and I didn't even get to play around with all of them, but luckily I've been looking at other people's videos because it seems like there might have been different builds available, because there were definitely skills that were available in some of the other builds that I've seen other creators play that were not available in my own build, which was interesting. Maybe they were trying to test different things and whatnot for different content creators, but I basically collected all of the skills that I was able to find, and these skills are actually pretty friggin' fun from what I can tell. But anyway, let's start with the basics. And this is an interesting thing because I've seen a lot of people talk about, especially after posting my video, a lot of people were talking about like, oh, isn't it going to get boring playing just one vocation because you're only going to have 4 weapon skills? But there's a lot more depth to each of the class than just their 4 weapon skills. And that's one of the things that I guess a lot of people still don't understand. And that is definitely going to be showcased here with the Mystic Spearhand. So starting with the basics, you have your weak attacks and your strong attacks, so to speak, you know, your square and triangle, or if you're using an Xbox controller, it would be your X and Y buttons. These will pretty much every class has like a weak attack and a strong attack, even though sometimes the strong attack might be a specific class mechanic, like in the case of the Trickster, as you guys will learn, because I also plan on doing a Trickster video. But in the case of the Mystic Spearhand, your weak attack is just a straight-up combo. You just attack your enemies. I don't even remember exactly how many hits there were in the combo, but you can just kind of like mash that and keep attacking enemies. Whereas your strong attack has a projectile, so it does like this swing, and then eventually it throws off a projectile against the enemy, which I thought was kind of neat. So that allows you to basically hit enemies from a distance, which is cool because a lot of times, especially when you're fighting against flying enemies and whatnot, there are going to be things that might be out of your reach if you happen to be a melee class, so that is very convenient. But on top of it, he also has mobility stuff that he can do to catch up to some of these flying enemies, which is really nice. But the strong attack is not just projectiles, it will also do critical attacks in some situations. Now, I've already mentioned critical attacks in my previous video, which is when a monster is down, you can go up to it, press the heavy attack button, and your character is going to do almost like an execution type move. But in the case of the Mystic Spearhand, you can also do it after using your specific vocation skill. And this is when we get to talk about that. So your vocation skill is something called the Redoubted Bolt. You use this by pressing R1 or the right bumper button, and your character basically fires off this little bolt. It doesn't really deal that much damage. It is designed more so to flinch enemies. But the thing about the Redoubted Bolt is that you are supposed to charge it. And once you charge it, it becomes the four-bedding bolt. I'm not exactly sure like what's going on with the pronunciation of a lot of the skills when it comes to the Mystic Spearhand, because a lot of them are pronounced a little bit weird. But you get this four-bedding bolt, and what that does is it's almost like a blast of energy that you throw out, and it slows your enemies down. Now, an interesting thing is that there are core abilities that can take advantage of this particular skill. So whenever you charge your four-bedding bolt, you can then follow it up by pressing another, R1 again once the four-bedding bolt hits your enemy. You have to time it properly. And if you press R1 again, if you have the right core skills, because there's a core skill called the Scattering Bolt, and what that does is it's going to basically explode the whole skill that you just did outwards, and it becomes an AoE attack, and it becomes AoE paralysis on all of your enemies, which is really, really cool. I didn't even get to experience this. I've just been seeing this stuff on other videos because I was mostly just exploring and whatever, but there are some very specific mechanics to this vocation skill, and it just makes me think about how much more complex it is going to get as you level up, because you have to keep in mind that these core skills are like at level 20, which I believe the characters were level 25 or something like that in the build that I played. So therefore, these are the core skills that we have available at level 25. So obviously your characters are going to level up a lot more. Like, it was not uncommon to see people go all the way up to level, well, I guess it probably was somewhat uncommon to see people go all the way up to level 200, because that was really for the more dedicated players. But you know, you can go above level 100 quite easily when it comes to Dragon's Dogma. So this is just a complexity from a level 20. Okay, keep that in mind. But yeah, so you charge your vocation skill by keeping the right bumper pressed, and then you release it, fires off a blast, and then if you press the button again, immediately as it hits your enemies, then you get a paralysis attack. On the other hand, if instead of hitting R1 just as you hit your enemies, you hit the cross button on PlayStation controller or the A button on your Xbox controller, then your character essentially teleports towards the enemy. And the cool thing about this is that if the enemy is still affected by the four-bedding bolt, which, like I said, the four-bedding bolt also slows enemies down, if the enemy is affected by that, in some enemies you can actually instantly perform a critical attack by pressing your heavy attack, which is really cool. I did this a couple of times and I didn't even realize that I was doing it. But yeah, so as you can see, just from the vocation skill alone, you already have like 3 more things that you can do, like AoE paralysis, teleport, and a critical attack, which is really nice. On top of it, you can use this to shoot at flying enemies. At one point, there was a harpy that was picked up one of my pawns and was flying away, and I blasted it with four-bedding bolt, and it just dropped like a rock because it couldn't keep flapping its wings, and so it just like dropped down, which I thought, oh, that's nice, so I can actually use this for this as well. It does require a little bit of aiming and whatnot. Now, in terms of melee abilities that we get, there's also a special core skill that you can have called the Winding Cut, and what that does is it allows you to mash your light attack, and your character will just start spinning the weapon around, you know, just like doing the whole spinny thing, and that's pretty much an infinite combo, so you can just keep spinning it forever. And especially if you happen to have a mage in your party or any other class that can kind of like enchant your weapon with elemental damage, I can see that thing dishing out so much punishment on enemies. It is going to be absolutely insane. Now, an interesting thing about the about the Mystic Spearhand, which is not common with some of the other vocations, like for instance the Fighter, is that a lot of the weapon skills that you can do with the Mystic Spearhand, and I'm talking specifically about weapon attacks, because Spearhand, a lot of the skills that we had in the preview builds were actually spells, which I'll be detailing, but we had 2 physical attacks, and those physical attacks can actually be used in the ground or in the air, which, as I was saying, is not something that you can do when it comes to the Fighter, because I tried doing some attacks with the Fighter from the air and it didn't work. But yeah, in the case of the Mystic Spearhand, you're going to be able to do those, which is really cool, because you can even see in some of the official promotional material, you can see the Mystic Spearhand jump into the air and then just like teleporting up through the griffin and backstabbing it. That is actually a combination of using your class vocation skill, using the teleport to go close to it, and then using a weapon skill, which is called Sky Dragoon's Fang Tooth, which basically is like a dragoon jump. Your character just jumps up and then stabs downwards, and it will hit the enemy. And a really cool thing about that specific weapon skill is that it will automatically mount a monster if you happen to land in a way that would be mountable. So say for instance, if you do this below like a Chimera or something like that, and you jump up and as you're stabbing down you land on its back, you will be in a mounted position and you can attack from above, which is really, really cool. And there are other skills with other vocations where you can do this as well, which is nice. Then the other skill, the other weapon skill that we had was also a gap closer, which is called Dragon's Fuin. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but it was basically like a charge, right? So your character will leap forward and do a charge in a stabbing motion against the enemies. And a really cool thing about this specific skill is that I actually used it for navigation. As I was playing through the game, there would be like these cliff sides, and I could see the other side of the cliff, but it would be like a long stretch to go around it. But if I was playing the Spearhand, I could just yeet myself across the cliff, which is really, really cool. Now, some of the other skills that were also present in the vocation was this one called Secking Storm, which summons energy knives. It's almost like Homeward Mass in Dark Souls games, if you've played those. But basically it summons like these 4 little orbs next to you, and when you get close to a target, they will, home in on the target and deal damage. Basically like a throwing knife or something like that, except it's made out of energy. Then you have a shield, which this one I really liked. So the shield spell is like this force field that you do around yourself, and it seems to block everything for a short period of time, because I would straight up do this in front of a dragon's breath and it would just stop the dragon's breath. And I was like, oh, okay. I would do this before a big Cyclops hit, and basically I would take no damage. And the cool thing about this shield, which is, I don't know if I said the name, it's called Mirror Vesture. The cool thing about this shield is that it's AoE. So it spreads to your pawns as well if they're close enough. So it's a support skill that not only was the only defensive skill that we had available, because you can't really block, you can't really dodge. This game does not have a dedicated dodge button unless you're playing maybe Thief or Archer. I assume one of those will have a dodge. But like the Mystic Spearhand does not have a dodge unless there's a skill that you get later. So this shield was the only defensive skill that I had, and it was an AoE shield that also shielded my pawns, which I thought was really, really good. But yeah, the shield was very impressive for me. Then we have this skill called Divine Offrange, and this one actually reminded me of Gravity Rush. So basically what the skill does is it creates a force field around you, and it will grab small objects or stones or things like that, or even the corpses of small enemies, or sometimes even the enemies themselves if they're a little bit lower on health. And you can grab them, and then you can throw them, and you can throw them against other enemies, which is one of the things that I showed in my previous video of me just using the Mystic Spearhand to throw enemies onto one another, which was really cool. I call that one the grab and yeet. Now, the next skill is called Onto Sky. And this is a weird one because I didn't even use this skill myself, but I did see 2-6, I don't know if it was 2-6 or Paradise we're playing, but one of them I saw using this skill, and it's hilarious. So basically, your character prepares that he spins his glaive, and then he prepares to swing it almost like a baseball bat. And then if you hit a small enemy with it, it just gets sent flying. Now, the important thing to mention is that if you use this skill, you actually miss out on loot, because enemies that are killed in this manner will not give you loot. But it's just funny to see them get yeeted off screen. It's hilarious. Then there's also a stamina drain move called Ravenor's Hound, which you can use to, leech stamina off of enemies, which can be very useful. Like, say, for instance, if you mount an enemy and then you're up in the air and your stamina is running out, you can drain a little bit of stamina and then keep doing things on the mount. That sounds pretty good. And then finally, there was one called Mystic Spearhand, which I don't know if I've seen footage of it being used, but it's basically like a big laser blast that you can do. And again, keep in mind, these are only things that I've seen for a level 25 Mystic Spearhand. I think this vocation is absolutely awesome. It looks like one of the most fun vocations. Like I said, it's pretty much a Jedi Knight fantasy. And yeah, I was really surprised. But anyways, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit more about the vocation. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit it up with a like. It really helps me out. And while you're down there, if you want to go ahead and subscribe for some more Dragon's Dogma 2 content, feel free to do so. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.